Cloud has become a business imperative, accelerated by the COVID-19 pandemic. Unprecedented events like this have an uncanny ability to force us to press the pause, rewind, and restart button. Now our minds are more open as we have to pause and ask ourselves if we have really positioned our organizations for the future. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to your third installment of Cloud Week. For those joining us for the first time, my name is Rapelang Rabana. The cloud is fundamental to business reinvention and recovery and has phenomenal potential to reshape a company's prospects. That said, enterprises' cloud efforts are slowing down, essentially stalling, causing a value gap to emerge. At this Cloud Week event series, our aim is to share with you, our clients, how you can maximize the value of the cloud. We have lined up a highly skilled list of Accenture's local and global experts to unpack Accenture's cloud solutions and capabilities. We have also invited some client speakers to do some deep dive sessions to share their journeys of how they are deriving value from their respective cloud investments. Our discussions today will be centered around living in a secure and sustainable cloud. Most businesses have invested a lot in cloud. Even those that did not want to invest in digital transformation have been forced to do so because of the pandemic. Many businesses are being drawn to the efficiency, elasticity, and innovation of the cloud, especially since the pandemic has led to the demand of remote working and more online services. These businesses are looking for systems that provide resilience, agility, adaptability, and scalability. They want to take advantage of the cloud to modernize services and transform. Sound like you? I am sure that there are quite a few challenges faced by chief information and security officers and other technology leaders when it comes to security, especially with cybercrimes and ransomware on the increase, not only in South Africa, but globally. You are not alone. Today, you will get the insights you need to make your cloud-first journey secure from the start. On the other hand, companies have another responsibility to deliver on new sustainability commitments, carbon reduction, and responsible innovation that doesn't hurt our environment. Companies have historically been driven by financial, security, and agility benefits to move to the cloud, but sustainability is becoming an imperative as well. Here is an interesting stat from Accenture's research. Migrations to the public cloud can reduce CO2 emissions by 59 million tons per year, which basically equates to taking 22 million cars off the road. So throughout this week, we have heard about how cloud, data and analytics and AI have ceased to be a CIO-only conversation, and now a C-suite conversation led by the CEO. We therefore felt it was proper and fitting to hear from the CEOs themselves and how they are leading this agenda in their own boardrooms. After this next video, Accenture CEO Vukani Ngati will be in conversation with Dion Geisa of Liquid Intelligent Technologies about cloud.
Thank you everyone for joining us today. We really appreciate you coming here and joining us in our event, Cloud event. We are once again very privileged today to have Dion Geyser, who's the CEO of Liquid Intelligent Technologies. Dion, I hope you're well, my good friend.
I am, Bukani. Thank you very much. And thank you for inviting us to your session this afternoon. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. I know that in our earlier chat when we spoke, we had a very good dialogue around the fact that COVID-19 has really fast-tracked, the adoption of new technologies in our workplaces, and really is serving as a catalyst to fast-tracking and enabling many of the CEOs and many of the C-suite leaders of various businesses to think very carefully about how they utilize cloud technologies in order to build sustainability in their businesses. I also know that your company has just gone through a significant rebranding exercise, but behind that rebranding, there is really a really big strategy shift. I'm keen just to hear a little bit about the vision that you have for your organization.
Thank you, Bukani. Yeah, I must say it's, Liquid over the last 12 months has gone through quite a major transformation journey itself. If you look at Liquid and the history of the company, the company started in 2004 as a wholesale provider out of Zimbabwe, and over time have grown into more than 13 countries of operation. Today, Bukani, we have more than 100,000 kilometers of fiber throughout the African continent. 30,000 of that is in South Africa. And of course, we are sitting with thousands of enterprise customers across the base. Very importantly, also, we're sitting with 5 very large data centers across the continent at this point in time. And if you mix that with our satellite assets, and specifically in South Africa, the spectrum assets which we have, as a company, we're sitting on quite a nice asset infrastructure piece. And it was always the aspiration of the shareholders to really grow beyond connectivity into value-added services. And what really culminated during the first part of COVID, if you think back in March last year, when we all went into lockdown across the various countries across the continent, it just gave our shareholders realization that, the time is right for us to really fast track and use the opportunity of COVID to fast track our transformation into what we defined as a form of a SI on top of our connectivity and I almost want to call it underground, but subsea and all the different assets which we have. We've not only added additional product suites to our business, specifically cloud services, managed services, unified communications. We've also recently launched our cybersecurity business. And what our team decided to do was actually to really focus on these growth initiatives. We also, of course, during the COVID pandemic, with the first launch of that, launched our working from home products. And, what was quite valuable is the comment that you made at the start is that, many businesses were faced with what do we do during this transition period with COVID? And what our executive team decided to do at a group level was actually that we as Liquid will be investing heavily around these additional capability sets. And that led to quite a large transformation, which, if you look at Liquid going to Liquid Intelligent Technologies, it's not only a new brand. We've added a lot of cloud, cybersecurity, communication product sets to the business. But underlying, we had to unfortunately change quite a big part of the capability in the team as well. Because it's one thing to say, hey, I want to be there, but you need to be able to solution it, sell it, deliver it, support it, bill it. So the last 12 months in the Liquid journey has been a major transformation shift for us. But to be honest, we firmly believe, well-timed, if you look at what the latest data sets are saying with regard to the growth in cloud services, cybersecurity, and related services that we've invested into. So if you take, I've joined the company as CEO in January, and where we at now, almost 8 months into the journey for me, if I compare the company that we are today versus what we were, a year ago when I signed my contract, we made quite major changes, and not only a logo. So, yeah, very happy to share that also with you guys.
Fantastic, Dion. You touched on a few points in that introduction, and one of them is skills.
Yeah, absolutely.
When I look at the country and the speed with which we can really take on cloud technologies, because we don't do cloud for the sake of moving people into cloud, but we really talk about cloud services because of the ability that it has to significantly transform business operations and how people think about enabling services to create a fast tracker in the ability to execute business. Just a quick brief view from you. How are you building this? What would your advice be on how to build, a cloud capability inside one's business? Because I think this is one issue that many businesses are grappling with.
So I think the aspect goes into quite a number of areas, if I can be very honest with you, Bukani. As I said, it's one thing to say, I want to be somewhere, but then you need to build it. And I think as a business which is using cloud services and selling cloud services, it is almost, it's two different capability sets, because on the one hand, you need a transformation in your IT and in your technology team, which think about cloud services and how to run, operationalize, and manage that from an operational process perspective. And that we developed over time as technology evolved. But absolutely as a business for us, really selling and going hard in terms of our investment into selling cloud services into the industry, we've really had to look at how to build that out. And to be honest with you, the strategy which we had to take was to go into the market and find expert skills. And associated to that, we've taken our top sales guys and we've taken the combination of the teams through quite a large enabling skills development. And it's not only, I don't want to call it a technical skill, it is absolutely the mindset of how you actually look at selling cloud services. One thing which we've really had to drive hard the last 8 months is, you have salespeople which go to a customer and then say, hey, here's my shopping list. You can buy a 100 meg line or a 1 gig line or hosting services. Here's my boutique of services, versus someone that can actually go to a CIO and a CEO and say, dear Mr. Customer, we understand that you're going into a transformation journey. What does it mean for you? And how do I actually expose my services to the best and the benefit of yourself? Because to be honest with you, in preparing for the session today, I went through a bit of my own thinking of cloud services and the journey I've been through over the last 4 years about cloud services, because many people talk about cloud, but what is it really? And if you talk to a CEO, which is maybe a FMCG manufacturer, right? Or if you go to a CEO, which is an asset holding company, right? They just hear the buzzword cloud, but what does it really mean? Is it cloud services or putting an application on top of common off-the-shelf hardware? Is it infrastructure as a service? Is it a hybrid cloud? Is it Microsoft, Google, AWS? What is it? And what applications do you actually have at the back end of that? So it really is about creating the capability that demystifies that in a language that the end customer can understand and actually start to grab the value of. So that's really something that we've spent a lot of effort on in trying to, how do we sell that, And then the second piece, of course, is to your skills question is how do you now go and deliver that,
Yes.
How do you build it out, and how do you support it at the end? And all of these, of course, have got different impacts from a value lifecycle perspective.
You talk about unlocking value. That excites me because this is our consultant language term.
That's your bread and butter.
Look, the reality, Dion, is, like I was mentioning earlier, the reason why we advocate for clients to take on cloud services is because we believe there's a significant amount of value that can be unlocked. For many clients that we talk to, which is the point also that you are making, is that they're grappling between understanding what really is this cloud thing, okay? Yeah. How can I actually me as the CEO, as the CIO, or as the CX of an organization can really deliver value for my business out of it. You are in the thick of it. You are helping clients, you are enabling them together with your partners to really drive the value to the clients. I want to ask you a key question. What do you believe are the main challenges experienced by your clients in really understanding this and deriving value out of? What would be your advice to some of the C-suite who are listening to us right now, wondering how can I earn value out of cloud?
I firmly believe, and Bokani, one thing I'm personally doing is I'm trying to meet as many customers as I can, and I'll explain to you why. I've met in my last 8 months more than 100 customers of our customer base. And it's quite interesting if you look at organizational structures, right? Many times people have put IT under the CFO function in the business, right? Which if, a CIO goes to the CFO and he starts having a technology discussion, the two don't always speak the same language. Then it becomes a numbers game. And not always, let's be quite frank, unfortunately, the guys fully understand the full life cycle opportunity that cloud services actually bring to a company. And that's really where the value lies, is to say, hey, but, for example, right now I'm running my IT environment. I'm running X amount of cost for my connectivity services. I've got service in a certain place. I'm using cloud services here for certain something, or I build an application myself. And how do I look at that transformation from a 5-year TCO perspective? So it really becomes a full life cycle cost discussion. And big picture is a strategy discussion, because, more and more I'm seeing technology and cloud services being a large enabler of the business. If you were to think about it, that a business historically would need to really spend a lot of effort in building a BI capability as part of its business. And BI adds a huge amount of value, from a business context perspective, of understanding and creating efficiency in a business, right? But imagine the CIO, which maybe doesn't have all the experience from a BI perspective, potentially having that dialogue with a CFO or with a CEO and going to the board and explaining that, because many times in a business, the CIO is the only guy sitting in that boardroom, which comes with that storyline. And I think that's of course the opportunity for you guys as Accenture, and of course beyond that, but very much from the consulting angle perspective, but very much a dialogue I'm having with customers that, right now I'm not talking only about one customer that's transforming, which is the CIO that we're talking about it, but I'm actually referring to the thousands of customers that is in our base, the hundreds of customers that we sponsoring and supporting from a journey perspective, and helping them to rethink that value chain. And that is, I think a big piece of the skill set and understanding. One thing I also realized in at least my own assessment on that, is the fact that our ICT environment in South Africa is very much driven around many partnerships. You have small channel partners and IT companies which started to form because there was a lack of IT experience in a certain part of the country or in a certain part of the industry. And to help these guys actually think about how do they leverage cloud services as they transform their partners' networks, because, they don't want to lose the revenue from an IT hardware sell perspective, as an example. So it really is, this cloud services piece is not only about the end customer that you need to think about the transformation, you also need to think about the channel partner and the IT hardware supplier, and how do you help him repivot his business and where he wants to go to, and what is the value out of that? The next piece is going to be touched on is voice services. We made a big investment in cloud voice services and capabilities, because if you really follow what the big cloud multinational tech companies are investing into, it's going after many of the traditional tech communication services, and therefore, over and above the pieces we just touched on is really to understand what the future world is. Yes. And taking that potential journey out, I can add on top of that just pure integration pieces, and. So I think there's a lot of pieces which, to the point which I made at the start, it is a bit about demystifying it for the stakeholders around that business, and helping them to understand the opportunity that cloud services can actually bring to them and how to really take that opportunity forward.
Dion, so this is so true. I mean, the reality is, we've got to help clients demystify where the value actually comes from. And the minute we can actually assist the guys to really understand how to harness the true value that you can get out of using technology. In the beginning, this was about cost.
Yeah.
One was trying to reduce cost by going to cloud because cloud would be cheaper and I don't have to have OPEX costs. I mean, a capital outlay, but the reality is you still up your OPEX costs. But the truth is where the value really comes from is in the innovation that you build to the business. Now, I want to talk about that because we have created a partnership between ourselves to help build innovation capabilities that you can take to clients and really help to drive growth together for our clients. So if you could just share a little bit about how you think about how the technologies that you are building can really be utilized in clients' environment to drive innovation, to really utilize the innovation to produce value.
Yeah, so I'll tell you my personal view on that, Lukani, and my own personal journey. When I joined in January, I took a bit of a strategic assessment as to how do we actually get into the right kind of dialogues with the right customers, right? And who do we learn from? I'm a firm believer that I come from a world where, your partners are your trusted advisors. You really take their advice, into what they say. We went through the industry and looked at partnerships and partners that we wanted to work with from a Liquid perspective that support us from a technology innovation perspective and bring world-class thinking into our business. And that's how we ended up with saying, look, why don't we take hands together with Accenture? You guys are a global business. You deal with a lot of technology innovation, consulting thinking. You also have really that brand from a trusted advisor perspective when people speak to you. And it was quite interesting when we started the dialogues about how many customers we actually service jointly via direct different relationships, and that's great. And of course, we will treat those relationships like that. But there's certain opportunities where I come from a tech background, and from my perspective is, one has to dream about the future and make it happen. And really looked at you guys and saying, you guys can really help us to get there in terms of our thinking. There's certain pieces that we won't build ourselves. There's certain pieces that we will need to partner. And that's how we end up with that journey. And I think the joint forces, from our perspective, again, there's a certain part of very interesting how the network develops if you start looking at cloud services. And if you look at data center infrastructure, and if you look at how peering at the back end works, and how latency is becoming important in the cloud services journey from an experience perspective, that we firsthand, of course, can add from a discussion you guys are having from your customer perspective in terms of the real experience. We build, the underlying infrastructure is ours. We know what difference it makes. We've moved all our services, if you look at our internal applications to the cloud, and we will be heavily investing in that into the future. So while we're selling that to our customers, we're also heavily investing into that ourselves. So when we sit in front and if I talk to customers, I talk about it firsthand, about the journey that we're taking, and that is different pieces, right? The one is using Microsoft, Google, AWS, and the rest. The other one is, well, how do I virtualize, use infrastructure as a service? How do I set up my network? So I do believe that the combination of the two actually adds a lot of value for us. And of course, in many areas, we potentially may compete, have direct relationships, but I like the learning that we're having between the two teams. And the organization is learning a lot jointly. And I think very importantly is the aspect which I read at the start, right? The fact that we operate in more than 13 countries, gives also a size and breadth to our business, which becomes interesting to our partners. More and more when we really put out Liquid intelligent technologies, people started to realize who we are as Liquid. And still today, even, many people in South Africa look at us and they say, well, you're Neotel. Yes, but if you look at Liquid as a business, we're a sizable business across the continent. And that size is interesting also for partners of ours in terms of expanding that into the rest of Africa.
No, fantastic, Dion. We could talk about this for the whole hour, but as you know, we haven't got much time left. But in closing, I want to seek your advice. If you were to put yourself in the shoes of a major retailer, a major bank today, or even for that matter, a small medium enterprise who is looking to making use of cloud technologies to drive growth and to really think about how to innovate at the core of their business using these technologies to improve their business performance, what are the 2 or 3 things you tell them?
I think it's pretty much reiterating what I just said, right, Bokani? And the first thing is let us help you to demystify it, and let's do that through partnerships. For example, with the likes of ourselves and Accenture and our cloud partners as well. And let's do that fact-based in terms of an assessment and understanding of what you have, and let us help you to plan that journey. That would be my first comment. The second thing is it is coming. This is like almost a train on a track, with a light on, which is coming our way. Digital transformation, cloud services is coming. Traditional services, the way it has been, will not be this way. And therefore, instead of waiting for it to disrupt your business, let's start to think how we actually start utilizing that technology, as you said, for the innovation that it can actually bring. So instead of having this as a fear of, hey, technology disruption, I don't want it, I like what I have. In any case, sitting in a post-COVID world, the world is changing. Let us help you change and utilize that technology for the business benefit it should bring. Those were the 3 points I would probably say.
Fantastic. Dion, thank you so much for the time this afternoon. Really, really appreciated the dialogue. And I'm sure many of our viewers who are with us today have learned a thing or two from the dialogue. And thank you so much for your time.
Thanks to you, and thanks for having us on the show. Appreciate it.
Great learnings there. Thank you, Dion and Vukani, for those useful insights. Cloud is more and more becoming the engine for growth, it seems. And which organization doesn't need to grow? Let's get into the main meal of today's session with our expert panelists. Allow me to welcome Clive Brindley, Africa's Cyber Defense Lead, and Bhavani Naidu, Managing Director of Accenture Technology. They will tell us more about secure and sustainable cloud.
Thank you, Rapalang. Hi, everyone. I'm Bhavani Naidu. I'm a Managing Director with Accenture Africa, looking after part of our technology sales.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Clive Brindley, and I'm the Security Practice Lead for Africa.
Clive, I was looking at the agenda a few minutes ago, and I must say we've got an interesting and exciting lineup for day 3, all about security and sustainability. What I do find interesting, though, is that regardless of the promise of cloud, around 40% of companies out there say that they're not achieving the benefits of cloud. And one of the key concerns is around security. CISOs are saying that they're challenged with security. I feel that's a bit counterintuitive, don't you think?
Yeah, it is certainly a very interesting perspective. If you look at what the cloud service providers have built into their platforms in terms of security and the native controls, you would argue that it should be more secure in many ways. I guess the challenge that we see is that with the plethora of new services and new offerings and workloads and microservices, and it's certainly getting much more complex. And we all know that a small misconfiguration can open up the environment to, I guess, nefarious entities, and that's when bad things happen. So it's not just the leveraging the capabilities of a secure cloud. You've got to look around the broader dimension of the operating model, the people, the process, the technology, your capabilities, and really how do you govern this. But in essence, we see that's typically where the wheels come off in terms of customers that are excited about moving to the cloud, but get concerned in terms of, are we ready? Can we really live in the cloud?
You're raising a good point, Clive. I mean, if I think back to what we heard about yesterday from our colleagues and experts all over the world, and the day before around transforming the enterprise, these are key aspects around the cloud journey. And what I find interesting is these are not siloed aspects. All of these are part of a greater whole. So have to be looked at together. And security to me is fundamental. I think if I look back and look at all our companies as well as companies out there in the market, we have different organizations that are leveraging cloud to different extents. Some might have a greater share of cloud subscriptions. Others might have just started their journey. But cloud is going to exist, if it doesn't already, in every single company out there. And so pivoting and changing our approach away from journey to cloud, as opposed to living in a secure cloud, is important. What do you think about that, Clive?
Absolutely. And, as I said earlier, we have different levels of cloud adoption. Most of the customers that I'm working with are well into their cloud journey and already pivoting and critically assessing their operating model. So what is this operating model? So essentially, there are a couple of dimensions to this. The first being governance. And I always like to simplify governance is, are we doing the right things? And are we doing those things right? So how do we validate that this new service that has been offered is secure? We know how to use it, and it doesn't expose the organization to, potential attack or compromise of confidential data. So perhaps that's where you would look at some kind of pipeline of validating that these things can move into production, and how do you assess them from a security perspective? And then and I guess when you look at the broader cloud operating model, not just security, how do we tie into the broader governance constructs of how the organization decides on which services they're going to consume in there? So that's really the governance piece, and it really has to get done right from the beginning. We then look at the capabilities. Interesting conversation I had with a customer a couple of weeks back in terms of, well, I've got to kind of rip up and replace everything that I have to do patch management in the cloud. And that's not necessarily true. A Windows server in the cloud is a Windows server. Patch it like you do in-house in your existing infrastructure. So teach the teams, educate them, and build their skills portfolio so that they can expand the tools into the cloud. So it's not a complete rip and replace, but it's around what are the elements that we have to evolve, and what are the elements we can retain and expand. And that obviously talks to economies of scales, efficiencies, and leveraging your existing skills. So there's some really interesting perspectives that we see with some customers, very pragmatic in how they achieve this. The other part is around the processes. So if you look at security operations centers and the way that you do threat hunting or the way that you do penetration testing, it's going to be a little bit different in the cloud because of some of the the gates that you have to go through. But in the end, they need to be tweaked, they need to be understood, and so that the teams can, I guess, drive forward and do what they want to do. The other element we see now is automation. So the more you can automate, the less errors you make. So, infrastructure as a code, provisioning scripts for standard services. Why do we need humans behind keyboards? And trust me, I make a lot of mistakes. I would much rather get my scripts to do it for me. And then interfaces. So how do we interface with third parties? How do we share information? How do we collaborate? Is another dimension in terms of the operating model. And last but not least is tools. And this is a really interesting discussion. And many of our customers are wrestling with this because native cloud services are great. But when you go multi-cloud, and you've got hypothetically Azure, and AWS, and Google, now you want to monitor end-to-end. How do you bring this all together from a posture management? Are things changing? Are we in the green? What should I be worried about? So then we look at vendor tools that can kind of give you that enterprise cloud posture as a management. So as much as it's complex, and I don't want to kind of underplay the complexity, but there are repeatable, proven patterns that can be adopted to minimize the risk and allow the business to grow confidently.
Clive, I have to say you're passionate about security.
I am. And, it's an interesting one because everybody says to me, when I first meet them, oh, you're the fun police. And that's not really fair. It's really about how do we understand the workload, make sure it's secure, and then let the business do what they need to do. We're partners, and that's how it should be seen. So slowly changing the mindset internally and with our customers, and it's an exciting time for us. And we shouldn't let the news highlights of all the bad things that happen kind of reduce our excitement and our ambition to do great things and to innovate and grow. So yeah, I'm excited.
Excellent. Clive, I think what I'm excited about is that point around sustainability that's in the agenda today. If we look at just from a green perspective, I think all of us are trying to live more eco-friendly, live greener. I think, each and every one of us are trying to change our lives in little ways. I mean, I, for one, I recycle. I'm sure, Clive, you've got some measures in place at your house as well. And all we want to do is have a better future for our kids at the end of the day, and their kids and their kids and so forth. What I do find interesting is this concept of sustainability and green cloud. One wouldn't automatically assume that infrastructure can be green. So what I do find interesting is that it can be done, and it can be deliberately done. So if we look at some of the tools we have in MyNav, looking at the Green Cloud Advisor, if we look to our partners, all of the hyperscalers that are out there, and we look at what they're driving forward in terms of sustainability, this is going to be a key point and a key topic for many companies out there. Consumers at the end of the day are worried and concerned about their future and about the future of our planet. And looking to leverage the cloud is important for companies, because what we are finding is that consumers are buying more and more eco-friendly products. I mean, how often do we see Twitter feeds or Twitter posts about companies that are not eco-friendly or not sustainable, or maybe even just destroying the planet in in whatever fashion? And that just builds up negative reputation. So I do find it quite fascinating that we can introduce this concept around eco-friendliness, around sustainability, around being green, into something that you would not normally recognize as being green. So today we're going to be hearing about this topic, and we're going to be hearing quite a bit from Vikrant Kalgad, who's our R&D labs lead, and he's going to be telling us about this. And I think for me, what's going to be important is to see how our companies within South Africa embrace this topic. So very much looking forward to that. So Clive, what about security for today? What's on the agenda?
Yeah, we've got a great panel of colleagues that will be joining us. They run our global security practice across a couple of hyperscalers. And essentially, you're going to be double-clicking on some of the topics that I discussed today. We'll be looking at some customer success stories, things that went well, lessons learned, and what does good really look like in terms of repeatable patterns that customers can consider. I think it's important that, if you look at any industry best practice, it's leverage the 80% and kind of tweak the 20%. So this is going to be a lot more technical, and looking at some of the intricacies of AWS and Azure, etc. So we are very excited. I'll definitely be listening in and looking forward to the session.
Thanks, Clive. Folks, there you have it, an exciting day 3 ahead. Let's move along now and hear from our panel on how businesses can find the value at the intersection of digital technologies and security and sustainability and still operate securely.
Thank you so much, Clive and Bhavani, for setting the scene for us. I'm going to coin this new area of secure and sustainable cloud, the S&S cloud. You can thank me later. Next up, we seek to answer the question, how can businesses find value at the intersection of digital technologies and their business priorities and still operate sustainably and securely? For this panel discussion, my panelists are special guests, Ishak Jacobs, Group Chief Cybersecurity Officer from Sasol, Clive Brindley again, Africa Cyber Defense Lead, Accenture South Africa, and Vikrant Kalgad, Technology Lab Fellow and Application Engineering Lead from Accenture, India. into the next theme of our session today, and we're going to be unpacking how businesses can really achieve business value at the intersection of digital technologies and your core company strategy while still operating securely and sustainably. Cloud offers us immense opportunities to change how we work, transform our operations, our customer experience, create new revenue streams. But security and compliance risks have always posed a barrier and a major of concern for boards and risk and compliance directors. Getting security right and getting the buy-in from your key stakeholders can accelerate cloud adoption and business agility. With the right cloud infrastructure, you can actually even go beyond security and ensure that you are optimized for energy efficiency and sustainability. And this, interestingly enough, can also drive the cost of cloud services down and improve your company's carbon footprint. So we'll be getting into it with my esteemed panelists who will be joining me. And it'll be Vikrant Kalgut of Accenture Labs, who is a Technology Lab Fellow and Application Energy R&D Group Lead, as well as Clive Brinley, who is the lead at Africa Cyber Defense. Our special guest is Ishak Jacobs from Sasol, who plays the role of Group Chief Cybersecurity Officer. So let's get straight into it and really get a great perspective and real perspective on how cybersecurity is applied in the real world using Ishak's experience and journey that he has undertaken. But first, to get into the discussion, let me start with you, Clive, and let's better get into this understanding of how companies can manage this pivot from hybrid on-premise services to public cloud workloads. Please do go ahead, Clive, and give us a sense of how you see South Africa Cloud playing out in the next 2 to 3 years.
Yeah, thanks, Rafael. It's great to be here, and that's a great question, and probably would need a couple of hours to really unpack. So let me see if I can focus on the salient points. So really, I think as a security leader today, the discussion has changed fundamentally from being the no police to how do I enable business securely. So we've got to get closer to the business. We've got to understand what they want to do and how do we grow with them. If you think about it in simplistic terms, you essentially have through a console your entire data center. And I'll just think about that. All your workloads, your applications and everything. And we know that one wrong misconfiguration can lead to bad things. So we do need excellence in every layer of the architecture, and that operating model, which focuses on what are the capabilities we need to protect, what are the capabilities we need to provision new infrastructure. So let's try and automate as much as we can. The more time Clive spends on a keyboard, probably the more errors you're going to get in the system. So how do we automate that and make it more secure? The people part is significant, and it's not just about technology. I mean, we've seen it through the ages that, people make it happen. And how do we upskill them and how do we train them? So if you're doing, for example, something like patch management in IT today, well, why don't you do that into the cloud? Yes, the processes might be a little bit different than that, but let's extend your skill set. Let's, get you working in that environment so that we can drive down costs and improve efficiencies. And working with partners and peers in determining what value they can bring, especially when you look at multi-cloud, when you have Azure and AWS and Google, and you want to kind of get an end-to-end view of your security posture, there are great solutions in the market that allow you to get that visibility. So there are a lot of moving parts, and there's no single answer to this. It requires a collaboration of multiple stakeholder groups, some really cool, smart technology, and in the end, it's about people. So I think if you look at it from an Africa and South Africa specifically, we've got to invest in skills. We've got to look at the talent that is coming through and give them practical hands-on knowledge in terms of how do they build their careers. Because this is exciting. I mean, you can see I'm very passionate. I often get told to, reduce how long I talk in it, but this is important for us. And I think we have a great opportunity to provide services on demand very quickly. But it's about balance in the end. And it's organizations that can get that right, that understand all the different levers and moving parts, that typically succeed. So exciting times for South Africa. It's awesome working with our customers, and be safe out there.
Thank you for that, Clive. And whenever I hear sort of situations that are so complex like that, I'm like, the people and human capital requirement is so big and so important to get right. I remember my own journey. We first moved to the cloud in the mid-2000s, and it actually created immense opportunities for younger developers to get involved, because now you weren't dealing with, complex hardware and infrastructure. So I think it's definitely a pull, a magnet that we can use going forward for South Africa. Mm-hmm. I want to bring in our special guest, Ishak. And he was giving us some perspectives from his experience in Sasol. And I'm sure he's also had to encounter this upskilling and the human capital priorities that are so key. Perhaps, Ishak, if you can introduce yourself and also maybe give us a bit of context in terms of how Sasol is approaching the design of its infrastructure to be secure by design and to be secure from the start.
Thanks, Rapilang, and good day to everyone. So, Ishak Jacobs, Chief Cybersecurity Officer for Sasol. And just on the question of how we approaching this, you got to start by recognizing, I think what you guys have discussed, that there's definitely significant benefits and value in the cloud for any business. And along with that is an increased risk of how do you keep things safe, because the one thing that the cloud does give you is speed, and really with speed comes that risk and governance and control that you need to implement. So from our perspective, I think in recognizing that this is the world we live in, we have to be able to unlock the opportunities. We're actually busy transforming our ways of work from an IT perspective, and that's fundamental to our approach in how do we keep the organization safe? Now, when I say we're transforming our ways of work, it's really about saying any IT service that we deliver has to go through some pipeline. Somebody comes up with an idea, and we're then moving this into a production. Yes, with cloud, it happens at speed, but that's where you need to start protecting things. Right at the idea level, what are those security principles that you need to embed? And how do you ensure this is in the pipeline throughout? When you test it, is security built into this? And that's really at the core of it. So when I say we're transforming our ways of work, it's really about shift everything left, go to the start. What are the security principles? What are the good design? And all of those things.
I really like what you said there about everything happens fast in the cloud. You can move quicker towards your business objectives and get good things fast, but it also allows for, bad things to happen. And that's why security becomes so important. You've obviously had to, bring together your teams across development and operations into DevOps, and I assume more on the cybersecurity side as well to create your DevSecOps. How has that been? And, how have you figured out how to lead such diverse teams and to identify, team members that can cut across the board of those capabilities?
So absolutely, it's been a challenge. We started the transformation around this DevSecOps, and it's almost been 3 years in the making. And let me just be the first one to say we are still learning. We still feel that we are in the crawling stages of getting to on top of this. But inevitably, it comes down to making sure you build in the good practices and good and smart governance. So what we focused on was how do we put in place a solid tool chain that automates the critical things around this. So is security checks and things like that in place? Is good code quality checks built into this and into the process? And automate, put in place a smart governance and making sure that, we actually try and get that benefits baked into the system in a way that it becomes kind of seamless. Not really, but, give the illusion that it happens without too much effort. And that's really, building that, changing the culture into this is the new normal. And that's how you move forward with this. So DevSecOps, you cannot live in this new world without it. And each part has got a very specific contribution to the end product, and making sure that you have these things flowing very nicely, automated, that really gives you that edge.
Sounds like automation really plays a key part in driving your cybersecurity efforts. So in terms of, testing and validating and ensuring, all your checklists are done, sounds like it's quite a big part there. And to what extent does that contribute perhaps to how you are able to still provide security while still enabling agility and innovation in the business, so that, your priorities can still be met, you can still move quickly? What kind of guardrails have you put in place? And, how do you design for that, for those two things that you need to balance every day?
So I think you nailed it, and I think Clive actually alluded to this earlier. If we have to keep on doing these things manually, we'll probably be making so many mistakes. We'll be redoing things all the time. And also in terms of the efficiency. So if you look at, I think the example of vulnerability management, the ability to just automatically scan your entire environment and pick up what are those risk components that's out there. If you actually have to do this manually, you're talking about hours and days and weeks, maybe months of work across a big company like a Sasol, and having to redo it because of all the mistakes. The ability to automate that gives you that results in minutes, gives you the opportunity to actually understand what is that big risk item that I need to worry about. So you automate the mundane things, get the humans to make the important decisions, prioritize, zoom in on what's needed. So I think, Rapilang, and like I said, as Clive mentioned, without automation, we in trouble. So let's make the best use of it, and let's get the best value out of it.
No, 100%. No one wants to do that mundane work, anymore. And you must have a lot of, internal stakeholders or internal customers, in your work, who also, want a lot of things, and then you still have to manage, that cybersecurity complexity and deliver to meet the objectives. How do you bring them along the journey so that they don't see the cybersecurity requirements as a hindrance to their objectives in the business?
So let me start by saying, you really need to make sure that cybersecurity is top of mind. You've got to constantly be doing the awareness and making sure that your stakeholders are fully aware of the importance of baking cybersecurity into everything we do. I think ultimately it's about recognizing that cybersecurity actually enables business. If you want to achieve your business vision and you're not protected, you actually have a big risk of going backwards. And I think as soon as the stakeholders start appreciating that and participating in this, then you actually have people working together. So I think it's about getting the right buy-in, making sure we communicate, keep people up to date, making sure that they realize the risk is real. And then from our team side as cybersecurity, making sure we bring our part and we are able to deliver quickly. You cannot tell people cybersecurity is important and they feel like you're not doing anything but wasting their time. Yeah. So that's really the bottom line, is well-informed stakeholders working together to deliver the right business value and knowing where cybersecurity fits into that.
Yeah, you raised some very important points there, in that, we need to understand how the cybersecurity enables our own functions in sales or customer service and operations, as opposed to this is what I do and cybersecurity sits on top, right? So it's a key thing I think we often have to educate people about. You're obviously doing well on your own cloud journey, Ishak, but I'm assuming you use a lot of Accenture support or expert cloud services and security services to help you along the way. What are some of the areas where you've benefited from the expertise of the likes of Clive and Vikrant?
Thanks. Good question. You know what? I think it comes out to recognizing that the cybersecurity has changed and is constantly changing, and you need people that is really on top of it. knowing what is happening, what the newest threats are, what is the best practice to protect business. And to be very honest, on our own, we've got enough of a battle to fight, just keeping our guard up, to actually keep an eye on what are these latest trends, threats, best practices, is really a challenge. And we don't necessarily have the skill or capacity. And this is where we look at the likes of a Clive and a Vikrant in the Accenture team to actually bring that to the front. Tell us what are those big ticket risks within this multi-cloud and this complex world. What is those best practices, risks that we need to look out for? And absolutely not something we can do without the experts. And we really appreciate that they are spending days and nights and hours and whatever else they take to be on top of it, so that I don't have to worry about that too much.
Great. Thank you so much, Ishak, for all of your inputs. I like to think of it as, standing on the shoulders of giants. Why start from scratch when you can lean on someone who's doing a lot of the work anyway? I think I've learned a lot from this engagement, especially around how you've worked so hard around the integration of skills and the human capital that you have to deliver this mix of security, development, and operational environments that allow you to enable security from the start and not as an afterthought. And that in this journey now where you're at, it's not so much about moving to the cloud, but living in the cloud as it becomes more and more complex. You've got multiple cloud environments at the moment, and, that multi-cloud management becomes even more important. And as we increase the velocity at which our businesses operate, that speed is great in terms of a competitive advantage, but we also need to know that, security risks also scale at that same speed. So the cybersecurity aspects are so key to stay on top of. Great insights there from Ishak and Clive. And I like to think of it as in design thinking world, making us smarter about the problem we're facing so that we can keep up with today's challenges. Now that we've had a good look at the security aspects, as well as the art of the possible in terms of the work Ishak has done at Sasol, we're now going to have another perspective on the cloud and what it means for the environment, where there is a lot of energy being consumed, in these data centers and in all the digital services that actually come with them, like blockchain. We need to look at how are we using this energy responsibly. And I have my very knowledgeable panelist, Vikrant, to actually unpack that a lot more for us. Vikrant, please do introduce yourself and tell us a bit about the role that you play at Accenture Labs and how sustainability is becoming an important factor in this cloud conversation.
Thanks, Rapilang. So my name is Vikrant, and I'm the global lead for application engineering R&D at Accenture Labs. One of the research areas which is quite close to my heart is on sustainability. And the question that we try and answer is, when we look at any technology, whether it is cloud, blockchain, artificial intelligence, is there a carbon footprint associated with that technology? And through the research that we have done, we did find some incredible insights into the carbon footprint that technology leaves. And therefore, when we think about using technology for business solutions, using technology for driving sustainability, we also have to look at it from the flip side and ask the question that what are the decisions that one needs to take to ensure that the technology itself is used in an environmentally friendly manner, in a sustainable manner, right? So that's the kind of work that I do in the labs. And I'm happy to talk about the impact cloud has on sustainability in the next few minutes.
Thank you so much, Vikrant, for that background. Let's go straight into that. How can technology specifically help with an organization's sustainability agenda? I think for most of us that come from a digital perspective, we often think that it's the traditional resources or natural resources businesses that need to think about sustainability and often overlook that role in the ICT sector. So please do unpack that for us.
So let me start by giving you some fascinating numbers. We talked about artificial intelligence. Now, there was a study that was done in 2019 where the environmental footprint of a large machine learning model was investigated. And what they found was very interesting. Training that model generated carbon emissions of equivalent of 5 American cars over their entire lifetimes. And that's like a pretty large number, right? When you consider that the lifetime emissions also include the emissions which are incurred when the cars are manufactured. Another interesting data point, if you look at the global data center energy consumption, there are studies which show that that is nearly equivalent to the annual electricity consumption of the country of Spain. So what these numbers indicate is that technology does have a significant carbon footprint. And as businesses start looking at becoming more responsible businesses, they have to start understanding what decisions they can take to reduce this technology carbon footprint.
Wow. So making sustainability choices for the cloud now isn't just about, making responsible decisions in cybersecurity, but also in how we lower our carbon emissions, which is an angle I think many of us quite easily forget. This doesn't sound as, well understood a topic as cybersecurity, for example. How do companies start thinking about how they adopt this idea of a sustainable cloud?
That's an interesting question, and let's break it down into 3 broad decisions that companies need to take when they start looking at cloud as a sustainability enabler. The first decision that companies need to start taking is the first step that they take on their cloud first journey, and the first step that they typically take is the choice of the cloud provider. And that's where they have to consider cloud providers, which are what we call as carbon thoughtful. And what does carbon thoughtful mean? It means understanding if the cloud providers have taken the right decisions in terms of the renewable energy that they use to power their data centers, what kind of optimizations they have done in building the data center infrastructure. Do they operate the data center in an energy efficient manner? Do they retire data center and their assets in an energy efficient manner, so on and so forth? So when you look at the complete life cycle of what a cloud provider does, all of their decisions have an impact on the footprint of the compute and cloud services that they offer to us for our solutions, right? So understanding what the cloud providers are doing is important, and that's the first step, choosing the right sustainable cloud provider. Now, having done that, the second question really becomes, how do I shift my applications from on-premises to the cloud? And if you look at the first strategy for a cloud migration, which is lift and shift, where I can just pick up an application from on-prem infrastructure and put it on the public cloud, just doing that has a significant benefit in terms of sustainability. So, for example, just a lift and shift can reduce energy consumption by 65%. It can reduce a lower carbon emissions by 84%. So that's a substantial benefit that we already get. But then to even further that benefit, we recommend that we couple this lift and shift strategy with the adoption of what we call as sustainable software engineering practices. So, for example, the choice of a programming language can actually have as much as 50% impact on the energy efficiency of the code that you write. Or if you choose cloud native architectures and optimize the code for using the cloud architectures appropriately, the reduction in carbon emissions can actually go from 84% that we saw earlier to 98%. So when we plan the ambitions on how we migrate to the cloud, we need to keep these 3 pillars in mind. And then finally, it's not just about migrating to the cloud, but it's about using the cloud as an enabler for sustainability use cases. So can we look at circular economy solutions which are built on the cloud? Can we think about sustainable products and services that we can design and offer to the market, which are again based on the cloud. So not only do we get the velocity that we talked about earlier in terms of innovation, but we can also ensure that that velocity is achieved in a sustainable manner, right? So all of these factors put together gives companies a way forward for adopting the sustainable cloud.
Wow, thank you. That you've just educated me a whole degree there. So I want to unpack those a bit more. So you talked about selecting the cloud service provider, that has this as a strong sustainability agenda. So that sort of means to me that in addition to the normal T's and C's, we should really be investigating what they are committing to do in order to reduce the energy reduction and carbon footprint, which isn't something I've looked at before. And in the transition to the cloud, beyond the lift and shift, it actually makes sense to consider better your programming languages for that efficiency, because I assume it also makes your applications run faster and be able to be more responsive, I assume. So I can see the sustainability, input really helping the efficiency of your business applications in addition. I love the third element around how do we build a different category of products altogether in a sustainable cloud. It's really opened some eyes, and I think we'll see a lot of innovations around that in the future. Thank you guys for that input. I think let's keep going, Vikrant, because you're teaching us a lot here. So what is the potential business value that a cloud can deliver in terms of the environmental impact as well as the business value? Can you unpack that a bit for us?
That's a great question, and oftentimes, sustainability is viewed as okay, it's my social commitment, so I need to do it, right? But it's not only a nice to have thing, and there is incredible evidence that shows that focus on sustainability can actually be a true and significant business differentiator. So in one of the studies that we did over a period of time from 2013 to 2019, we found that there is an explicit link between the high ratings for environmental, social, and governance, or what is called as the ESG performance, and financial outperformance, right? Which is pretty impressive. So what we found is that high ESG scorers typically achieved operating margins which are 5 times higher, and total annual returns to stakeholders, which are 2.3 times higher than those companies who scored lower on their ESG over that same time period. Which means that focusing on sustainability not only helps you comply and not only helps you contribute to the global sustainability goals, but it also helps you achieve a financial outperformance, and that's where sort of that dual benefit is accrued by the companies. And because we're talking about the cloud, earlier I talked about the carbon reductions being reduced by 84 to 98%. Just to put this in a perspective, if you were to migrate global data centers to the public cloud using the sustainable cloud practices that we talked about earlier, it has the potential of reducing CO2 emissions by 59 million tons per year, which is the same as taking off 22 million cars off the road annually, that's a huge and massive sustainability benefit. And that's the kind of impact that we are talking of, both in the financial world space and the sustainability space.
Incredible stuff. Can you give us some examples? I remember reading about a company called Winnows that uses AI and analytics to optimize food wastage.
Yeah, so Winnow is a great example of the third principle that we talked about, where we start using cloud as an enabler for sustainability innovations. And what they use is they use the cloud as a platform for deploying their AI models and analytic tools to help chefs cut food waste in commercial kitchens. And they have shown over time that kitchens who use their solution cut the food cost by 3 to 8%, They drive the ROI by 2 to 10 times year on year. So that's the kind of impact that creating a cloud-based sustainability solution. So we are reducing the food waste in commercial kitchens, but at the same time, improving on the return on investment, right? So that's a great success story, if I will, of using the cloud for sustainability.
Incredible stuff. And I mean, I assume this can be applied in multiple and different sectors. So we should really be unpacking a lot more of those case studies. So tell me, in the work that you do day to day, how does Accenture help companies to adopt a sustainable cloud? What are the techniques and methodologies you use?
So, like I said, the adoption of the cloud for sustainability is a complex decision, because you have to consider a variety of factors in terms of choosing the right cloud provider, choosing the right architecture, so on and so forth. So one of the things that we have done over time is to pack in all the knowledge and the expertise that we have built over time on creating sustainable cloud solutions into an asset called Accenture Green Cloud Advisor. So the Accenture Green Cloud Advisor uses patent pending algorithms to understand the carbon footprint of a client's existing data center estate, and then it performs its magic to recommend green cloud solutions which the client can adopt to start accruing the sustainability benefits of the cloud. So that's something that is available for us to test drive, to see how it can be used in your context. And you can use the QR code on the screen. You can use the QR code on the postcard in your packet to fill out a form and get in touch with us. And we can help you test drive the Green Cloud Advisor for your business.
I'll definitely be doing that at the next break. Thank you for that. Clive, I'd love to pull you back in here. And what's sort of your comments on how you integrate security requirements and sustainability requirements in the cloud?
Yeah, very interesting. I mean, I'm certainly learning a lot from Vikrant, and he brought some great points across. So in my experience, what I see is that typically, being very transparent, a lot of that thinking doesn't really permeate through. And I guess that's because we're trying to address the complexities of managing the risk within the cloud environment and that. But I do think as more organizations pivot to becoming more comfortable with the way they operate securely in the cloud and can validate that the machinery is achieving its objectives, we need to start pivoting our thinking in terms of it's more than security. It's actually about our environment. And I guess, just it's really interesting to hear the stats in terms of how organizations perform when they have this at the forefront of their thinking. For me, that just means that you're considering a lot of different things and you're more open, and that in itself is a great enabler for innovation, which kind of fuels, the growth in business strategy. So, I think there's some work to be done, especially in security. How do we use more efficient, appropriate technologies? And really, you see a lot of overlapping technologies. And every time that happens, you've got to actually switch it off and remove, because that's using power and that's kind of affecting your carbon footprint. So it's about getting the right architecture, the right technology, and how you operate it, and be, I guess, more multidimensional in how we think in terms of sustainability.
Cool. These are sort of all coming together in my head. I certainly hadn't before, put them together in my head like this. Ishak, have you had conversations around the sustainability agenda? I know your primary area of focus and expertise is around cybersecurity, but being in the energy business, I assume this has always been a priority for you. How have you factored that in to your technology environments?
Look, I think what I have to echo Clive's sentiments is probably not top of mind for us. We really just trying to get to grips with understanding the challenges and the fast-moving nature of cybersecurity. But what I do find interesting is the way Vikrant articulated that this is actually much more achievable than what you would imagine. If you bring up this topic, I would think this seems like another massive project on its own. And yet, I think what Vikrant presented was, no, here it is in front of you. Here's a quick toolkit. And look, I think, like you said, from a Sasol perspective, absolutely very important to us, sustainability. That's just the nature of the business that we're in, that it's really, top of mind. And certainly from an IT perspective and cybersecurity, wherever we are able to contribute to it and where it makes sense, we will certainly need to look at it. And I think it's the awareness that Vikrant created that makes me think, okay, this is something that's actually, it's real, it's achievable, it's not too far-fetched, and maybe we need to put it on the radar.
Yeah, and I got the sense also that we probably applying some of those sustainability principles already, and we just weren't aware of how positive the impact can be. And perhaps if we, focus in on those a bit more, we'll derive more value. Vikrant, I want to challenge you a bit more. And whenever we, build businesses, there's always new dimensions to keep thinking about, new important things. And surely adding all these layers results in some trade-offs where we have to deprioritize, other things. What would you say to that business executive that is concerned about the deprioritization of other existing business priorities when they think about adopting the sustainable cloud?
Yeah, that's a great question, and that's something that gets often asked to us. But I wouldn't call it a trade-off. I would call it how do we balance the different priorities, and how do we create the sustainable cloud solutions in a holistic manner. So just to give you a couple of examples of how that balance actually has to be achieved, right? So one of the things is, like we said, that choose the right cloud provider, locate your applications and data in a location that is the greenest in terms of, let's say, the renewable energy usage. But what happens if the data residency policies that are governing the country where the applications and data are generated, do they allow us to go to that greenest location? If they do, fantastic, you have the best of both worlds. But if not, then you would have to search for the next optimum green location, which can help you achieve sustainability, but also be compliant with data residency. Or for example, if you start talking of cloud native architectures like containerization, that again is fascinating. But as you start, slicing your applications and data into microservices and microdata containers, are you ensuring that the security of those containers is taken into account, right? So not only should we look at containerization as a sustainability enabler, but we also now need to think about how do I amp up my security practices to ensure that architecture is now secure as well. So once you start considering these different factors, you start creating a more balanced and holistic view of sustainability. And I think that's what companies need to think about.
Sure. So it's really about understanding all the different pieces in the puzzle you're trying to build, and ignoring some pieces might actually undermine your business priorities and in that journey. But thank you, Vikrant, and to my panelists, very, very useful inputs that we've gained here. So ladies and gentlemen, you have heard from the range of experts we've provided you with today. So reach out to us to know more about these capabilities and how they can be used within your organization and your unique context. All you have to do is scan the QR code on the screen and fill in the required information. You can also use the postcard in your branded pack to scan the QR code there, or you can use the chat tool that's available on the platform to express your interest. Whatever works best for you. Some of my key takeaways, from this conversation are really around, one, how important that cloud provider selection is. I had never really considered this before. It was really just the functionality that I looked at in terms of a cloud provider. But now it's quite clear that you can solve a lot of your own sustainability priorities by choosing that right cloud provider to work with. The other big insight for me was the journey in living in the cloud after moving to the cloud is a continuous one in terms of cybersecurity and sustainability. Once you're there, you need to keep learning and optimizing for shifting cybersecurity threats and requirements. But you also need to keep considering how you continue to optimize your energy uses by the choice of programming language or platforms that you work with. And it's actually an ongoing journey that you can do more than just move to the cloud to deliver on your sustainability objectives. For me, that's been quite an eye-opening thought. And lastly, you don't have to do these kind of journeys by yourself. Partnering is quite key to stand on the shoulders of giants, as I mentioned earlier. And in the tech space, it's always been critical for me to know what everybody else has done before, so you can speed up your own delivery and your own journey. There's no point really sitting in the corner and battling on your own when you've got an array of experts and panelists that I've had an incredible privilege to engage with today. So like all innovations, to truly manifest the value, you need to go beyond just ticking the box of cybersecurity and sustainability as an afterthought and really reimagine the kind of businesses that you want to build, the underlying processes that will support it, so you ultimately deliver on the business value creation and customer experiences that you seek. Thank you for joining us for this session.
We're now going to take a 5-minute body break, and we will be right back. So grab that coffee. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Let's get into the final session of the day. And joining us for this deep dive session of living in a secure cloud is Sean Mulchandani, AWS Security Lead from Accenture USA, Andrew Winkelman, Cloud and Infrastructure Security Lead, also from Accenture USA, and Orica Ori, Cloud Transformation Associate Manager, Accenture South Africa. Over to you, Andrew.
Hello, my name is Andrew, and let's get started. The pace of innovation has increased, as you can see. The data I like to say is 90% of the world's data has been created in just the past 2 years alone. We're about 70 years in from having computers and modern technology. In the last 2 years, 90%. That is just simply amazing. One of the big things that continues to access and accelerate as well is security. But the pace of innovation requires different ways to do security. As you can see here, AI, machine learning, these things and the pace of innovation and how fast businesses, especially in today's world, need to innovate creates difficulties and challenges for security. And we're here to talk to you today about some of the things that we've done around this to take care of and secure the next modern workplace, and the next generation of business apps. And we'll go on to the next slide. And we'll do a little bit of a double click specifically on security. So, this is a chart that we asked, CISOs and CIOs, what are the big things you're investing in? And you can see here a significant amount of these things have to do with automation, repeatable processes. And you can see here privileged access management. That wasn't in any of these resources at CIO and CISO levels, top four. AI was number one in two of them, SOAR. So security orchestrated response was number one. So you can see a pattern of just like business applications and everything else are going to Kubernetes and cloud services or serverless, security is moving in that same direction. And CISOs, want to have those same technologies and those same different things to keep up with the business. And so there is and Sean will go into it in a little bit too in Orica, but it's always a combination of third-party services and then cloud native. And repeatable processes automation is the key to securing the next generation of your cloud services. And if we go on to the next slide, we'll do another double click on how we think about securing the public cloud. And how we think about this is almost everything falls into three buckets. The first one is secure the platform. So the secure the platform, and this is across the different CSPs, whether it's Azure, whether it's AWS, or where it's Google. All these things fall into these three different buckets. So you're securing the platform. So there's a different identity, as an example, just for the subscription in Azure or the AWS IAM. And the different across the globe, you can have multiple dozens, hundreds of these different things, but there's an identity for cloud administrators and people to log into that. If we do a double click on the second one is secure the services. If we do in AWS, if we do AWS Lambda, in Azure we have Azure Functions, there's a separate identity just for that Azure service. It's separate from the different platform. And so those are the different things is almost everything will fall into three buckets. And the last bucket is, integrate to enterprise. So your traditional enterprise security tools don't necessarily go away. Your GRC, your security operations, SIM, your network security, data protection, encryption, a lot of these, including identity governance, integrate into the cloud services. So most of these different items fall into one of these three buckets. Securing the platform is super critical as far as a foundation. And then, uniquely, how do you secure those different services? There's a different encryption in the cloud, and there's a lot of different things that you can only do using the cloud native services. And that's where we've spent a ton of time on is how do we properly secure those with blocking, auto-remediate, just like we kind of talked about with the pace of innovation. We had to take a different focus with developer mindset and how do we automate and repeatable process. Things move so quickly in the cloud as well. So previously you have your network on-premise data center, and you have firewalls, and you have some different guardrails. In the public cloud, you're 15 minutes and a credit card away from having a cloud environment, and a single button click from putting things on the public internet. And so being focused on proactive blocking and auto-remediate focus controls is something we really spend a lot of time heavily doing, and that enables the business and the developers to continue full speed, both the security team, with the proper guidance. So going over these different things, there's a lot of different components, and there's multiple right ways to do things, and there is wrong ways to do things as well. But it's always a combination of third-party services and the cloud native, in a combination of those, customized to each specific client. And now we will take a double click on specifically a CSP, and that is AWS. And so now I'll transition to my colleague, Sean, to go over the AWS cloud and security model. Sean?
Well, thank you, Andrew, and hello, everyone. So I think, as Andrew mentioned, it's key to essentially thinking about this when you secure really the platform and the foundation, services, integrate with enterprise, and of course then have some holistic integrated operations for infrastructure, apps, and security, of course, right? When we think AWS, I'd encourage the audience here really to look at this slide bottom up. So many of you have heard of and are very, very familiar with, say, things like golden images or golden AMIs for virtual machines. You've heard of hardened and compliant environments. And really, if you start with a foundation in mind, at least for AWS, the goal really for this building block and the keystone is how do you get a golden or hardened and compliant environment or account itself? When we think about moving applications and workloads into the cloud, when we think about actually developing greenfield applications in AWS, how do you essentially have the right application to account mappings? And then for every single account, past, present, future, how do you essentially establish your lowest common denominator of security capabilities? For example, every vended account has DR capabilities. There's tagging for that account and infrastructure within it. There's auto remediation for assets or resources created in such accounts that don't meet your tagging and compliance requirements. Similarly, as we keep moving up the stack, for each of these accounts when provisioned, when workloads go in or when VPCs are created, how do you make sure that connectivity is established based on tags that map to, say, your production, non-production, or sandbox environments? So you have some clear segregation across. And this is done not only in the form of, say, transit gateway routing and route tables, but also making sure you have some centralized inspection, be it with a leading third-party provider like Palo Alto, or of course, several native capabilities like the AWS Network Firewall. And as you move up, it's much the same when you look at that same level of consistency that you'd like to have in how you provision your users, any break glass processes for accounts across the organization, baseline roles, permission sets, and what you intentionally blacklist that your organization doesn't necessarily use. For example, oftentimes we've seen pharmaceutical companies or resourcing and mining companies, et cetera, that haven't necessarily disabled capabilities like QLDB or Amazon Managed Blockchain, which are wonderful services. However, they may never use. When you think about AWS with approximately 257 services and spanning almost 36 regions, it is very, very important that we actually help reduce the attack surface by shrinking this to essentially the 40, 60, or maybe 90 services that you utilize, the 2, 6, or 8 maybe regions that some of our large clients and you often tend to utilize. And of course, making sure that everyone into the environment is coming through federated access, able to access the accounts they need, and you have that corresponding anomaly detection in place. When we move up the stack, I think it's important to just talk about how logging and monitoring really applies to all of the blocks below it, right? This is something that when you have an account, when you have workloads in it, AWS gives you this wonderful opportunity to have, say, services like Guard Duty, Security Hub, or you have other services and third-party capabilities such as Qualys or SignalFX and more. How do you basically enable all of this in every account, in every region, in a programmatic way, and make sure that you're forwarding items of interest, potentially not the voluminous VPC flow logs, however, most certainly some of your Qualys or Security Hub findings to your SIM or SOC, and that includes any capabilities you have in cloud-based SIM providers, or of course on-premise. And finally, when it comes to securing services, we know of those 257 services, whether you use, again, CloudFormation or Terraform to provision them. As Andrew mentioned, there are not only within these 257 services is it hard, but the rate at which they change, the types of configurations you have for, say, S3 buckets, or CloudFront distributions and more, it is key to essentially establish guardrails upfront for each of the, again, 40, 60, or 90 enterprise services you use, and make sure that you're actually proactively securely provisioning services. With this, now that we've gone through a little bit of a double click in how to think about this from an AWS perspective, and how you essentially have CI/CD or DevSecOps from an infrastructure perspective to really scale securely, I'd like to hand it to Orca, who's going to contextualize it far more of why this matters to us in South Africa and Africa at large.
Thanks so much, Sean. So I'll be discussing how this affects us in South Africa. Recently, the Personal Protection of Information Act, or POPI, came into effect around the beginning of July 2021. Most organizations have now met the 8 principles to remain compliant, listed here and as evidenced by the multitude of emails we've all been receiving in the last few weeks. So how do we as organizations ensure that we remain compliant in the future? Can we ensure that our cloud applications automatically identify and address our compliance issues and before they become a problem? I'm going to talk about a few of the principles and how they can be addressed in the cloud. So the first principle is accountability. Assuming we have the required controls in place to ensure compliance, the appointed information officer should still be aware of ongoing status and remediation of any of the alerts. Tools such as Azure Information Protection, Symmetry Data Guard, and other similar tools can be used to identify the personally identifiable information, or PII, in your environment, and alert when the PII is exposed, for instance, to the public domain, if it's unencrypted, or if it's otherwise vulnerable. Then we have purpose specification. When collecting PII, the reasoning must be specific, explicitly defined, and lawful. And a good strategy to manage this is by having a tagging strategy in place. The tagging strategy needs to be enforced at the earliest possible point of the collection of the PII. And then we have further processing limitation. In the case where we have PII which is required to be processed further, we do need to collect explicit permission from the user or the company. So how do we ensure that this is in place? The tagging strategy can come into place again. Our alerts can be set up that if someone does try to use a specific piece of information for a purpose other than what it's tagged for, the enforcement and remediation can then completely block this action, ensure the organization is notified of the user who performed the action and what data the action was performed on, and then this can be reviewed and appropriate actions taken. Now talking about information quality and openness, these work together hand in hand. The subject needs to be aware of any data collected, and all data collected needs to be complete, accurate, and updated at all times. Ensuring this is addressed in the cloud can be done by enforcing a data management and retention strategy. You can require that any PII data is scheduled for deletion after it's not required, scheduled for updates in a certain amount of time, be that monthly or yearly, and add quite a few other considerations to this. And finally, talking about the security safeguards. These definitely need to be in place to protect your PII, especially the PII which your organization holds long term. This includes terms that Sean has mentioned previously, which is encryption of data, key management, secrets management practices, our logging and monitoring of all the actions on the PII data, and then ensuring that these controls are updated, they address new threats in the environment, and so on. So moving on to the next slide. What can we expect over the next few months and years, given that it's been a month of Poppy right now? So the first thing we'll start to see is an increase in our security breaches in the news. This doesn't necessarily mean that there are more breaches. This will mainly be due to the Poppy regulation that all affected subjects must be notified of a breach where the data has been involved. In addition, the increase in remote workers due to the ongoing pandemic has also led most organizations to implement Poppy compliant security frameworks. There's solutions such as the Secure Cloud Foundation, which offers support for your security relating to detection of your security threats, the identification and protection of it defined via a response strategy. This is an important strategy for organizations to have, given the increased scrutiny and hefty penalties in case of a breach. These penalties can be up to 10 million rand or even jail time of up to 10 years. The current cloud environment changes constantly, as Andrew mentioned, with new security tools and threats constantly appearing in our environment. I mean, we've seen this with the ransomware attacks, which are becoming more and more common. Protecting your ever-changing cloud environment and the workers can be difficult. What we'll start to see as well is an increase in security awareness training for both our remote workers and office workers. This training definitely needs to address factors such as awareness among employees of their responsibilities, especially under your company's privacy policies, how to reduce the risk of a privacy breach, and any informational handling practices in their day-to-day business activities, especially when related to PII. According to a recent Accenture study, in 2019, South Africa had the third highest number of cybercrime victims of any country. The report found that in some cases, South Africa was being used as a testing ground for malware and ransomware attacks due to the minimal security measures we have in place. The Cybercrimes Act, adopted by the National Assembly in January 2020, will be a great start in prosecuting these offenders, resulting in possible fines and imprisonment of between 5 to 10 years. Once this bill comes into force, we'll start to see the punishment of cybercrimes offenders, and hopefully this will be in reaction to the breaches we're currently seeing. So where does your company start to ensure they're protected and compliant? I'm going to hand back to Sean to take us through this.
Well, thank you, Orica. So, yes, we've talked about, obviously, not only being a new paradigm as part of the change. I think we strongly believe it is the paradigm, right? When it comes to your business acceleration, adoption of new capabilities, utilizing adjacent technologies such as AI and ML for your business transformation and growth. How do you really start? Right. Though the one thing, while we did discuss obviously some of the impacts of Poppy and some of them are more negative, how do we really use security as a differentiator and where do you start? I think it all starts with diversity. A lot of us talk about it in the workplace and in a broader sense, and we shouldn't lose sight of the fact that even between infrastructure, network, security, application teams, it's critical. And really that starts with making sure that you have, say, some of your app developer teams, infrastructure as code engineers or other cloud engineers, potentially database administrators and more, that either skill up in cloud security or at least frequently interact with a number of your cloud security engineers, architects, and subject matter experts. right? I think that's very, very key. We've seen in a data center world where there are silos of infra, network, security, and app, and that's never really good, because that has led to us as a security community historically being perceived or truly being a party of no versus yes, I want to empower the business. I want to empower the transformation. I want to accelerate migrations or optimize operations with security built in, not a bolt on, right? And I think it's also equally important that when we do that, we are, of course, walking before we're sprinting. I'm not saying crawl, walk, run. We're just starting with the walk and then, of course, going to the sprint. And part of that, of course, is gaining visibility into the environment, making sure you have the right audit and detection policies, and then, of course, moving on to, of course, starting the more proactive policies and blocking activities, right? We've seen in our experience a number of firms worldwide. We're talking mining and resources companies in emerging economies, to some of the financial powerhouses in North America, to highly sensitive healthcare and pharma environments globally. There are potentially 50, 70, 100,000 security findings. Of course, it's important to remediate those, and oftentimes that's far quicker than one anticipates. It's not that hard, right? And then more important, it's just a little more effort to make sure that those aren't repeated every single month. And I think that's very, very key for businesses to understand. It isn't as hard as you think it is. And really what it needs is some commingling and confirmation, the buy-in and embracing of security as a value creator, the expansion to potentially having that auto-REM or proactive blocking in place. And of course, then scaling over time, where of course you are leveraging native capabilities here and now, and you are essentially making incremental and then exponential progress day after day as you integrate with more of your enterprise security capabilities and those required by your regulatory, compliance, and other bodies. As we move to the next slide, I think just to put all of this in perspective, what are some of the keys to success? I know we've gone far and we've gone really fast in the last 25 minutes, but I think it all starts with picking the right partner. One of the reasons to do this more than anything else is not always because partners may have better skilled resources or the best engineers. This isn't to say you do not have the talent already. I think the key to having a right partner is one that's in with you for the long term, and that one that's had the exposure of what's worked and what's not worked in your industry segment, in your geographical market. And that's priceless, because that's standing on the shoulders of giants, right? And that's how you can truly be the market leader in your industry. The second really is around focusing on an outcome-based approach. And this is very important. Oftentimes we see that security is focused on as the bolt-on with a resource-centric view of I need one person, or when I have 10 people, then I will do. And I think we have to pivot the mindset of we're all building, we're all automating, we're all operating, and we're just embedding security within. We're not accepting less from ourselves, from our partners, from our vendors, and more. And finally, I think we've talked about a number of items when it comes to coordination across teams, and of course, embedding some of these capabilities as part of the walk to sprint, right? Where we are doing things such as inspecting traffic, gaining visibility of assets, and of course, treating identity in the cloud as really the new frontier. It's not just all about perimeter defense, but I think it's really looking at some of those roles, permissions, and more across, say, the 257 services in AWS, the 150 plus in Azure, maybe nearing 200 now, and of course, several in the 100 for GCP, Oracle, and other CSPs as well. If you've enjoyed this session, I think as we move to the next slide, I do want to mention that there's a great way to express your interest. While we've talked about many things, I think one of the things that's piqued our interest really as practitioners with Andrew, Orca, myself, and more is really something along the lines of PII, PHI, and more detection, discovery, detection, and potentially even response. We found one of the capabilities called Data Guard by Symmetry Systems to be very interesting. Now, there are a few players in this space. There are a number of other amazing third-party vendors, big and emerging, amazing startups to watch as well. I think you'd find this very, very interesting from we built securely, we've automated service provisioning, we have foundation, more. How do we actually know what data resides across our native data lakes, other systems, databases on EC2 or Azure VMs, and more? So if you'd like, definitely give it a look. And I think a very, very huge thank you from Andrew, Orca, and myself for joining us as part of this session. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew, Sean, and Orca, for giving us a bird's eye view on how to live in a secure cloud environment. Fact, technology is being adopted at a very fast pace. There's a revolution in IT consumption and how we provide it. There's new models of pay-as-you-use shared resources that provide easy access to advanced technology. The ability to source IT capabilities through the cloud provides scalability and flexibility and enormous computational power. There has also been phenomenal growth in data. The last 2 years alone have seen the creation of 90% of the world's data. And this is driven by a number of things. The explosion of the Internet of Things, literally everything is becoming intelligent. And soon enough, so will your coffee mug. This proliferation of devices is supported by a huge reduction in data costs. And thanks to AI, we're able to manage the significant increase in unstructured, unlabeled data across multiple formats beyond text to include voice, image, and video. Machines are becoming even smarter. With new advances in machine learning and deep learning, we can now provide numerous value-creating use cases capable of leveraging this enormous set of data. AI-driven automation will also have a dramatic impact on business models and operations. Then there is the need for tech fluency for the whole workforce. To derive maximum benefit, you as an organization have to take your people along for that digital transformation journey. It is so important that companies train their workforce to make sure that they can consume the new data being provided, make those data-driven decisions, understand how automation and AI can be used to break existing constraints in the organization, and most importantly, as we have learned today, to be aware of what to look out for to avoid security breaches. Even at a personal level, individuals need to do the same because digital platforms make us all susceptible to cyber crimes. We all need to build up detection and security systems to make sure that we safeguard and protect our digital assets. Secure your platforms, secure your business, sustain your business. Whether you need to improve decision-making or deliver services to underserved customer segments, or improve your value proposition to your existing customers, or reduce your costs to serve those customers, or create an empowering culture for employees to lead with data, you are bound to need to use more data and artificial intelligence. And that just can't happen without a cloud foundation. I sure hope that you did take time to scan the QR code in your branded pack or type in your details in the chat box provided to express your interest on the Symmetry Systems Data Guard assessment tools. Someone from Accenture will soon be in touch with you. A thank you to all of our viewers and delegates for joining us on this third day. And thank you to our speakers and experts who have shared with us their most incredible insights. Today was a great session, and please don't forget to tune in tomorrow for your final installment as we bring you more insights on learnings for innovation and growth. Thank you, Accenture, for this great initiative. Have a wonderful afternoon and even better evening, and see you soon. From me, Rapelang Rabana, thank you and cheers.